Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. My name is Mazoe Ford, and I'm the ABC's Southeast Asia correspondent based here in Bangkok, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. It's great to be back in the club, isn't it, after time watching from home virtually for so long, and there's loads of great events coming up, so make sure you head to the Facebook page and the website to take a look at the events that are coming up. And welcome, of course, to everybody at home who is watching tonight. So tonight we do have a really important discussion. Allegations of sexual assault and rape against a senior member of the Democrat Party have sparked a Me Too conversation in Thailand, raising questions about the prevalence of rape and gender-based violence across Thai society. The former deputy leader of the Democrat Party, Prinn Panitchpakdi, resigned in April after sexual assault and indecency allegations were raised against him by an 18-year-old woman. And since then, at least a dozen more women have filed their own sexual assault claims against him. More broadly, there have been sexual assault cases in schools, universities and other settings, but reliable data is hard to come by. There are just a few statistics on rape in Thailand, but some surveys have suggested that between 15 and 20% of Thai women have faced gender-based violence. I'd like to introduce our panellists this evening. Fortunately, one of our panellists isn't able to join us because she's not well. Chumpunit Nakontap is unable to join us. But we are very pleased to say welcome tonight to Busia Srisampom Kun Best. Thank you very much for joining us. She's a human rights lawyer and founder of Shiro. Shiro works on denormalising gender-based violence in Thailand by providing pro bono legal aid to survivors, as well as empowerment programs and policy advocacy. To her right, we've got Kunnana Wipapan Wongsawam. She's the founder of Thai Consent. Thai Consent works towards creating a culture of consent in Thailand through its forums and by producing media promoting understanding and knowledge surrounding sexual assault, as well as sharing anonymised stories from survivors. And then stuck in traffic in Bangkok, yes, Bangkok is back, we are waiting for Tida Yingcharon, the director of the Policy Centre at Thai Sang Thai Party. I'll start off with the questions tonight, then open up some questions to you here in our audience, as well as to our viewers online. So if you are following on the Facebook page, you can leave your questions in the comments section, and we'll be sure to get to some of those later. Now, just before I begin, I'd like to show a slide. If we could pop that slide up, please. Thank you, Kuntam. I'd like to acknowledge that the subject matter that we're looking at tonight is very serious, important, sensitive, and might be triggering for some people. If the issues that we speak about tonight raise concerns for you, these are some organisations that you can reach out to. Please take a look at these websites, and if there's anything triggering for you tonight, be sure to look into that. We'll put this slide up a few times tonight. So let's get into it. First of all, Kun Best, we'll start with you. I'd like to start by asking you for your assessment of this issue in Thailand. Is this the start of a Me Too movement, or is this something that's been happening for a long time that just hasn't hit the headlines?
Thank you. Yes, so this is definitely not the start of the movement. Gender-based violence happened long time ago, happened everywhere, happens every minute that we sit here and talk about this. There's a gender-based violence, there are domestic violence, there are rape case happen somewhere. And the challenge is most of the time that we find out about rape survivor, sexual harassment survivor is often the time that the incident has passed so many years. You know, most of the sexual violence survivor doesn't wake up the next day or go to report or talk about their story right after the incident. That is only few percent of survivors who actually do that. So there is no perfect victim in this world. And there's also no perfect abuser. And I think because of our culture, our institutions, education system, the media, portray the picture of victim or survivor in a certain way and portray the image of abuser in a certain way. That's why we stuck in this kind of attitude. We stuck in the myth that what survivor supposed to look like. So if you see some women come out to the public and say, I have been abused, I have been raped, And that woman is privileged and strong and powerful, doesn't have any scars, can speak properly. You put a question. You're questioning her, why didn't you come sooner? Why you look like you fine? The thing is, when incident happen, the trauma that happened to each person, it shows in different way. And the lack of understanding of the trauma-informed care within the justice system, within the social welfare and health system, cause a lot of pushback. It's caused survivor to, just decide to stay silent because they already know the stigmatization that could happen. So this is just a image that I put up last minute just now. And this, maybe it's too small, but this is to give the idea that the case we saw in Me Too, the story we hear from Me Too movement is just a tip of the iceberg. And what you can see every time when there's some survivor come up and talk about their story, the why question's gonna happen. Why did you go out with him that night? Why would you decide to go be in the same room that night? And what we can see here is that no one asked the why question to a abuser, never. The only person who knows why rape happened, the only person who knows why violence happened is the abuser, right? Yet, every time the why question direct towards victims or survivor here. I use the term victim and survivor interchangeably because there are people who still consider themselves as a victim. They are not survived anything yet. But as an advocate, I would avoid using the terms victim because it can be there's a lot of stigma around that. Maybe you can move up to the next slide, please. Yes, so why there's a lot of, the myth around this case and why there's a lot of blame, the way that we just ask so many questions and direct the why questions towards the survivor that actually is explaining the rape culture and reinforcing the victim blaming culture. And the reason I say that Me Too didn't just happen a few years ago, because we live in a society where catcalling is normalized. We live in a society where unwanted touching is considered nothing. We live in the society that rape jokes considered just funny. But in a way, normalization of that kind of culture, you open the door for abuser to do more things. You send a signal to survivor if something happened to them. No one gonna take you aside because you either hysterical, you think too much, you put yourself in that situation. So if we ask why rape is happening, if we ask why this, phenomena or this problem has never gone away, because we never really get rid of the bottom of the pyramid. And every time when there are people at the bottom of the pyramid trying to calling out sexist attitude, calling out, how stalking is wrong, how, catcalling or like sexual misconduct is wrong, you always get backlash. So in a way, the way that society and maybe some of us here or some of us who are listening right now normalize the issue at the bottom, you kind of support the assault at the top of the pyramid. So if we really want to start talking about this issue, I think it's not just about case-by-case basis. It's not just about the recent incident with the politician. It's just the Me Too explain the systemic oppression, the systemic discrimination. Of course, there are survivors, there are victims who are not just women, they are LGBTIQ, and there are male survivors as well. But what we talk about is here that we talk about how the social and gender norms, the gender imbalance, where there's the power imbalance there, it's kind of reinforce the whole, it's kind of allow the violence to happen, because where there's power imbalance, you open the chance to abuser, to abuse their power all the time. So like I used to like to say that everywhere, any sphere, home, society, school, in any institution, if there's a power imbalance, if there's a group of people or just one person have the power over the others, that place will always have survivors. That place will always feel with victim, because those dominant people can always abuse their power. But before coming up to this stage, I have got a chance to talk to some people, and they talk about, sometime when we have a panel about violence against women, there are men who say, like, why you just talk about Me Too? Like, men there are male survivors too. So I explained that Me Too, we talk about someone has been individually abused and also systemically abused. But then certain gender has been individually abused but still upheld by the system. You see what I mean here? Some group of people, the oppressed population, the people who are marginalized by the system, when they are abused, they are crushed by the system as well. It's harder for them to get support. It's harder for them to access to justice. It's harder for them to maintain their well-being and financial stability. But for some group of people, even though they are abused too, of course it's not fair, it's not right, and they need support too. But because we live in the world that still have the power and gender imbalance, the institutions still uphold them somehow. So I'm not going to go to the next slide because I may not have much time. But anyway, I feel like it's important to step back and think of how difficult someone who has been through sexual violence to having to talk about their story. And most of the time you have this kind of trauma impact, right? You freeze and you either fight or flight. And most of the rape survivors have experience the freeze episode where their body just shut down. And if they have to come to the police station, or if they have to give a detailed testimony, a story about what happened, how they are questioned. The police will question them like, how many times you has been raped? How many times, and what time is it exactly? Imagine that happen. So of course, most of the time when the survivor decide to report, they just, if they doesn't have a proper empowering team with them, if they doesn't have a right counselor, social worker who can empower them through the path, they would give up. And if they give up and one day they find the right team and they decide to go back again, society will question them again, why you just come out now? So I think there's a lot of things to think about before you start questioning the survivor to decide to speak up, because when one survivor speak up, is you see how empowering is it. You see how it's kind of trying to challenge the taboo that put the shame on the victim. Is actually the person who should supposed to be ashamed of is the abuser, because they are the one who inflicts violence. Yes, so I think I'll stop there first and let other speakers.
Some good points to unpack later though, so thank you very much for starting us tonight. Kunnana, what's your assessment of this issue in Thailand at the moment?
Okay, so hi, I want it to be casual. So for Thai Consent, we are the media activists. We founded in 2015, but actually I found Thai Consent because I am one of the rape victims myself, and I was raped when I was in the first year of university. It's 2013, and it takes me 2 years to realize that what happened to me was a rape. And why it comes to me like very slow. Imagine In 2017, I speak about this because I have like 7 of my art friends. We are in art faculty. We are like all ladies, and we have like lady nights, and we share about this. And we discover that we, the ladies, went through the same kind of situation with different men, but in the same pattern. So it is not that we are like, have a bad luck to meet a bad guy, but there are something behind that allow it to happen. And when I start Thai consent, it because I want to convince the society, especially the friend of me, to know that if you have sex with a woman who are drunk enough that she cannot like protect herself, that she cannot like deny properly, that she cannot like escape from you, that's rape. And that was that was a rape action in 2017, 2015. Imagine นะคะ 7 years ago, we still have to educate Thai people that if you have sex with drunk women, it's a rape. That's how Thailand was 7 years ago. And like even back in that day, we don't even have a native word to represent what consent means. And it's a very blurred line in the like Thai society. So like from this issue and along the journey of 7 years advocating like young people to claim like justice like by like different means, I found that many did claiming their like justice secretly. They don't want to get like have the public spotlight. They want it to be private and end within themselves and the abuser, which mostly are their friend, their colleague, or maybe like their relative. And for those who want to get the help from the media, mostly there are people who face the abuser that are more powerful than them. For example, in 2017, there were cases of Silapakon students who like kind of like have Me Too in their own way. That like there were a serial victim of a senior professor who lured the student to become the model, like the nude model, and like he tried to push for like something more, and he have the like picture to blackmail like all the students. So the case happened, I think, repeatedly over 7 years, but it takes 7 years to become the news. And I think it was a big news, but no one labeled it like a Me Too because they have their own hashtag. And each time the event like this occur in Thai society, they have their own hashtag because we are not like the English speaking country. So I think that's why when people come and ask me about Me Too and Thailand situation, I will be like, we do have our own like hashtag, and like sometimes Thai people cannot relate with what happened outside because there are language barrier as well. And along the journey, I would say like คุณเบส say ค่ะ women call out every year นะคะ on their own experience and on their own campaign, on their own word, but they never have a chance to be big, sometimes because they don't want to make it big. And even they want to make it famous, they want someone to help badly, like the professor and student case, they are not famous enough, so the media weren't interested as them. That's the question I might have to question back to our like journalist friend in Thailand, that like every time the media and the dramas, the news happen in Thailand, we present it as the entertainment. But I'm sorry, it's like that. It's the story of like melancholy people, the story of like very bad, like sad story that provoke public emotion and discussion. And you present that in the way that like you just want the rating. And if the character isn't good enough for the story, the media will just discard it. And many times, like how we say, like what คุณเบส say ค่ะ perfect victim. The person who often deal with their case in secret are those who know that they are not the นางเอก not the main protagonists who are all perfect and all good. They can be like sometimes naughty. They can be like outside of the good woman standard of Thailand, and they know that if they go on the media, they will not get the pityness from the crowd. So for Thailand, how we like use media to support sexual justice, there are the bias among that, depends on who is the victim. If the person have like good character or have the bad character. So we are still in the politics team นะคะ is the character politics or the personalized politics too. For the case that I am invited to give the opinion with the like case in Democrat Party, I still figure out that are we having the Me Too movement just to push the whole situation of women, every woman in the same momentum, or are we going to like get rid of one bad guy, and then the other women will suffer like the same because no system change. So I think I am here to question back more on like people who are interested in this topic. That are we forget the other women who went through the injustice system, and are we only focus on the like famous case just because the character are like famous enough to be blow up as the news. And also I was in the politics as well. I am in the like politics since 2018, and you have to imagine นะคะว่า in 2018 I tried to push the gender policy into the party, and I think mostly back then there were the time I get a lot of rejection because they say it's not the main priority. Our main priority now is to reclaim the democracy, and that comes from the very progressive party. And imagine นะคะ it takes me 7 years here, and now people come to me and ask for my consultant to do the risk management when their party get accused of sexual harassment. So they have 7 years to learn about it. They have me as the resource person, but they never learn about it. They never ask for like having education about it. But they want me to like help them when they have the risk. So I think it's not to, so go back to this topic, the politics of sexual assault. I'm thinking like, are we going to treat them as the political tools, or are we going to treat them as the policy, as the system to help everyone, not only the few? And also in politics, I think, yeah, it can be the tools to like get rid of the one you don't like, to like maybe it works too, to like discredit the party you don't like so. But I would say there are like plenty of political party nowadays and highlight the gender policy นะคะ They support the gender equality, they empower women, they empower LGBTQ people. But you have to see if in their party, everyone in the party apply the gender respect idea to everyone, or they leave that job just to the activist politics. Are they like everyone apply on that, or is only the specialists in the party handle that for the public? For me, I'm here to ask the question that the political party look at this issue as a thing that everyone must improve upon, or is that the risk management issue that they want to manage? And that's it.
Thank you very much. Kuntita, welcome. It's nice to have you join us. Tita Youngcharoen is here now. She is the director of the Policy Centre at Thai Sang Thai Party. We've just been asking each of the panellists to give their assessment of this issue in Thailand at the moment. Do you think this is the start of the Me Too movement in Thailand, or is it something that's been going for a long time but just hasn't made the headlines?
I think to start up answering that question, I'm probably going to say that it's been going on for a while, but it's just been brought into the spotlight quite recently. But to answer the question in a very broad terms, what would be my assessment in terms of the issue that we're discussing today, whether it's a Me Too movement or how we see this, sexual violence and these issues in general. So I'm going to approach this question in 3 different perspectives. One, in terms of the social structure, and secondly, in terms of the public policies, and thirdly, in terms of how do we go about creating the social awareness. So on the first point, I have to start with analyzing what exactly would be the social structure, or rather you look at a country like Thailand, or countries quite similar to Thailand. It's more of a societal structure rather than only the social structure. We have the concept of patriarchy, where you have the male-dominated society. We have the very concept in Thailand like authoritarianism, where very much society focuses and idolizes, condones the idea of power, whether that comes from the very male structure or that comes from anyone who is in power. I think that's a very root cause of the process of victimization, or the process of this case like sexual violence happening. I think that's very tied into socialization of how society becomes socialized in terms of how society is taught. The population is also taught to believe, be led to believe in certain ways. But also, I don't want to only focus on the very idea of patriarchy, because I think certain victims can be male and can be of any gender as well. So I think the bigger picture, going back to the very idea of authoritarianism, how do we condone the very pyramid of structure of power when someone, staying or coming from the very top of the pyramid, if they do something wrong or they use this kind of power or force in order to victimize someone else, and therefore what would be the kind of reaction that society is going to push for it. I think that's particularly quite interesting when it comes to the structure of political parties as well. As we know, Thailand may not have the highest numbers in terms of the female representatives in the parliament. You're going to talk about how these policies come about in terms of legislators. We have very low number, especially quite recently after this government, the number it's also becoming even lower as well. So that is quite concerning. So that brings me to the second point in terms of public policies, how they're being formulated, how they're being crafted. You look at the structure of political parties in Thailand, there are quite a number of political parties, but probably we can focus on like maybe top 10 or top 15 big political parties. You need to look at the proportion or the ratio of male and female, firstly in terms of the level of management board. You will see at the level of party leaders, you can find maybe only 1, 2, or maybe 3 big political parties who have female as being the leaders of the parties. And you look at the second level in terms of the management board, that's even less. You will not find an equal representation of male and female. Why is that important? Because a lot of decisions are being made by influential decision makers, and they're mostly the ones who are sitting in the management board. They're the ones, for example, if they're not represented by women enough, it's quite likely that they will not understand truly the issues that women are facing, or even you can speak that in terms of that the groups who represent also other groups who get victimized by other public policies as well. And then it goes to the third level, where you have the legislators or the representatives, in this case members of parliament. You also have very low number of female representatives, so that it's again very concerning. And that translates into public policies, how they're being formulated in terms of gender responsive budgeting, in terms of certain policies in which are centered around women or victims, or the most recent case that everyone is talking about, the elephant in the room, right? Like we see that there's quite very low social awareness when it comes to how do we go about preventing this from happening again, and also how do we go about solving this problem in a long run, right? It was a trend that people are discussing here and there, but there's never to a movement to the point where this is, people would think, you need to probably revolutionize, the whole, how the structure it's being written, how the society and also political parties, how they're structured in general. That brings me to my final point in terms of the social awareness. When assessing the status quo, the situation that was happening in Thailand and other societies, relevant societies, right? How do we go about to the point where do we achieve or create the social awareness to the point that people feel that we actually need to do something about it? I think firstly we need to create the role models, the ones who are able to speak up against the structure of authoritarianism, or those who are in power, or even in this case could be the male-dominated society as one of the factors. We also need to create the kind of curriculum in schools. We need to teach the students since young the very concept of consent, concept of victimization, concept of how justice system should be fair, right? And then eventually we need to craft, or we need to groom all the students or the people, population society, to be able to always speak up and to be able to always come to the point where they all support each other. That will go back to change the social structure and societal structure. That will also change the public policies eventually, and not only through the official channels. So that would be my approach in terms of the perspectives that I see in current issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's some good points there which we'll unpack with you later. I'd like to go back to you, Kun Best. you mentioned that survivors don't tend to report straight away. It can take years for them to come forward, and indeed that was Kunana's experience as well. What barriers exist for survivors who are seeking justice in this country?
There are so many barriers in terms of, psychological challenge, and I was talking about victim blaming culture, and then most of the time, survivors who live in the world socialize and internalize the stories about how everyone else who are survivor has been blamed. So when it's happened to them, of course they know they would be blamed too. So it's not easy for someone to like have the confidence or can be 100% sure with themselves that, oh, if I talk about my story, I'm gonna be okay. So even for some case, even that's not the case that they go into public and tell people about what happened. But let's say the case that go to report, the first door of justice system, right, where women go to report is supposed to be, safe, it's supposed to be private, it's supposed to be confidential. But if you want to know how it feels like, try go to the Thai police station and to see if you can tell your secret story there. Many cases, survivors are forced to sit in the main room in front of everyone and to talk about their traumatic story. Not every survivor want to scream their story to the world. We of course, we see the Me Too movement, we encourage everybody else to you have to talk about this, you have to go to the journalist, you have to make your story into the media. But not everyone comfortable with that. It's their right to tell their story. And we have to ask as well whether everybody in the society deserve to hear their story, So when a survivor, go to the police station and see how unsafe and unfriendly it is, of course, they decide to go back home. Or even for some survivors who already go through the process and having questioned so many times, they've been re-traumatized, re-triggering, there has been victim blaming, and then they, eventually withdraw their report. So that's the problem with the justice system. How about with the community system, with the family institutions? There are many families who still doesn't understand and not be so supportive of their, daughters or sons or their children. I come across so many survivors who've been discouraged by their parents, by their relatives, to come out and to access to justice system. But then most of the time with the sexual violence case, most of the abusers are the one close to them, are the one, even in their family or one of their relatives. And most of the time, people in their family don't trust the survivor. There are so many cases of child survivor trying to ask for help, and people in the family say that the kids are lying. And this happens all the time. And if you look at the number each year of how many sexual violence cases have been reported, this is just the case that can be captured by the health department and at the ER and at the hospital. And look at the case that really can be able to access to justice. It's come from almost, 10, 20,000, and then 150 cases made to the police station. So what lost in between? You can't just look at sexual violence as a linear journey. You walk out to the community, they know that you has been abused in the society where doesn't have the good awareness and understanding. Of course, in Thai education system, never talk about human rights, never talk about gender-based violence, never talk about sex education, never talk about the rights, our body autonomy. And that left people, kind of, it's like you're going to the war zone, but you're not protected at all. And you also go into the war zone where everyone have such a misogynistic attitude towards you. And once they know that you have been abused, there's so many stigmatization. So imagine you are so discouraged by your family, discouraged by your friends. Maybe some of your friends ask the question, so how did it happen? Did you go out with him that night? How did you dress? Or you turn on your television, you see the media talk about rape case and go into so detail and trying to describe the event and trying to make it a trauma porn. Yeah. So I borrow some from some of my friends here. The idea of every time when the rape case, every time when you expose domestic violence, gender-based violence, it has become emotional. People are trying to sensitize this. No one really kind of respect the importance of human dignity of a person. Imagine the survivor watch that and see how humiliating gonna be for me. And then you walk to, or maybe if you're Buddhist, you walk to see the monk, and the monk would say to you, and this is really happening to the real case of mine, and the monk would tell the survivor that it's your karma from your past life, so you have to really kind of, so let's look at it as a journey where each system kind of hurting you, oppressing you, and if all the system pushing you that how can you move? And unless you have people to slowly remove the barriers, slowly trying to make it challenging disappear. If someone can talk to the family to be supportive, then okay, you can walk one step. If someone can talk to the authority, to law enforcement, you have to be more sensitive. You have to learn about trauma-informed care. You have to understand why they couldn't talk about their story properly. You have to understand you cannot just ask physical evidence out of the gender-based violence case. There's so many things related to that. And taking care of gender-based violence case is like multidisciplinary. You need the whole team of, psychologists, caseworker, case manager who understand the case. You need law enforcement who really understand all of the trauma associated to the case. But let's say, how are the chances survivor will be lucky enough to access to that in the country where it's controlled by male dominant, in the country where the one who designed the policy and the law doesn't take the lived experience of survivor into account at all. So, and it's so many other institutions that's crushing the survivor, economic as well. There are survivors who couldn't take leave to go to the police station. They have to, some of the kids just give up going to the court because they have to work and they have to take care of their kids. Some student in a university couldn't go to court, couldn't follow up with their case because they have to take exam, and the university doesn't understand. So and you ask why it's so difficult for them to come up, and you ask why.
Barriers everywhere.
Yeah. You're trying to stop me now. Okay.
No. I'd like to get.
I know. I'm not going to talk too much. Otherwise, I'm going to take like an hour or something.
I'd like to though get to suggestions from all of you later as to where do you even start to break down those barriers. But before we do that, there's a few other things that we should cover. On that issue with consent and sex education, Kunnana, what level of sex education and consent awareness is taught in schools and in universities, and what level should be?
What it is in Thai education is don't have sex. End of story. That's how they teach the kid. Don't have sex. And if you have sex, we don't care about you anymore. I think that's how we get the formal education in Thai school. And maybe they might taught us about the health-related sex education, like how your sperm being produced, how is your period going to produce, how the baby has been made. But I think none of it talk about the human right. None of it talk about the autonomy of like us, the body. And they also advise the women to like say no more and try to say no strongly, and never taught the boys to respect the girls, and never like taught or otherwise they will be like, if the boy cannot protect themselves, it's their fault too. And don't only talk about sex education, but I think every subject in school humiliate the student. the Thai school humiliate Thai student in every level, not only about the sex, but the school control you, what do you wear, and sometimes the violation happen, like I have friends who are like, they go to school and they don't wear สื้อซับ we have the Thai student shirt, which is white, and you have to wear another white tank top inside before you wear the bar inside. And some students being punished because they don't wear tank top. And they have a teacher to go and check up if the student wear tank top. Some school even check if the student wear the, กางเกงซ้อน the short pants under the skirt before they have the panties. I mean, the school abuse the student since that level. And how do we expect Thai school to teach you about consent? You learn about authority. You learn about how to be afraid of the powerful since day zero at school and until the last day at the school in every level. Where it should be, I think it will be a long answer to give, but I think that everything must be demolished and rethink about it again on like what should be the education we have as a human being that have the dignity, and not only about sex education, but about authority of one person as a human, not as the, I don't know, like someone that must follow the powerful all the time. I think my answer gonna be too long on this too, but that's the main idea on how to like think about it later.
Kuntita, what role do lawmakers have then in addressing a few things, raising the education and changing that system that is there that just says no sex at all, right through to more female lawmakers in the right positions to make sure that women are represented properly in these conversations?
I think there are quite different ways to go about it to answer that question too. Apart from the things I have already mentioned during my introduction speech, I think firstly you need to look into how exactly do we go about increasing the number of female representatives, whether that would be in a legislative house, whether that would be in terms of public policy making process as a whole. Apart from trying to get the successful role models as being someone that people can look up to, being someone who's like up there and being able to shine and become successful in what they're doing, I think we need to have a systematic training or an open systematic space where we can recruit more female potentials to be able to come into the space and also understand exactly what kind of challenges they have to go through, understand how would they be able to navigate into this very difficult space for them to be more represented. For example, like with my party during the last International Women's Day, we announced that we will continue to train more female representatives or more female potentials who are interested in coming into help with public policies, whether that be in roles of politics directly or whether there be roles of contributing to formulating policies. So we realized that that's where the pain point is, because people don't know where to start and people don't know exactly how to be equipped for them to navigate this very new basically waters for them. And also I think we also need to bring together all the female representatives, or in this case could be minority groups, for example female, together for them to be able to always meet, for them to always be able to exchange ideas, to make them feel that they have a community of support, to make them feel they have a community of people who are always going to be there for them, to give them advice, to be able to always lift them up, whether that means getting further in their political careers, getting further in their policy maker career related or in professionals, right? So I think that they need a kind of community support, they need that kind of very systematic way of helping them, and not just doing it in a very scattered way. I think when you look at Thailand, for example, we don't see any proper institution in which they provide this kind of training or support for them. There might be some, I think, smaller organizations who are doing it because it's their own cause. They want to do it to raise awareness, but there's still no, in terms of the success rate, in terms of putting the female representatives out there So I think that needs to be addressed more.
What role do men have to play then in being allies for women and elevating women so that this work can be done?
I think I'm totally for like hashtag he for she, right? Like everything that men can do, they definitely should do to support women. If we look at the split of male-female, for example, 50 to 50, it doesn't make sense to create this kind of social movement if the other 50% of the population do not support or do not participate in this kind of very big movement that's going. So I think there are a lot of things that men can do. It could be in a very private or personal level. They need to support women who are close to them. It could be women in the house, it could be their friends, it could be their partners, it could be anyone that their colleagues that they're working with. And then they should expand, secondly, into the bigger circle. It could be the people who are friends of friends. It could be the people who share the same kind of interest they have, whether there would be any cause or anything that they're doing for society, for example. Make sure that you support them to be able to get promoted at work, to be able to become a female boss, for example, to be able to become successful in politics or in society, in business. And lastly, they should, in general, support in terms of policy as well. I think a lot of people do not want to support new policies or new changes because they feel that they have something to lose out of it. But I think in this case, you need to change that mindset. There is actually no rights that male will actually lose in terms of women becoming more empowered. So I think that kind of mindset needs to change.
Kun Best, let's go back to some of those barriers. The psychological barriers, family and friends, police, those are some big things to overcome. What work is being done in Thailand to try to overcome those barriers?
In Thailand, by the government?
By all sectors. Well, is enough being done? What
no.
needs to be done?
So I think I forgot to mention another challenge for survivor, especially the sexual violence survivor, when they experienced abuse. Sometimes, their psychological trauma where they have experienced the trauma response freeze. I come across some of the survivors would take months or take years before they remember what happened to them or make sense of what happened to them, because it's like how your brain, protect you by just black out, all the memory disappear. So sometimes it takes a long time before the survivor realize what happened, and then that's why, hence, some of the case take a while to report and being questioned by the authority. So I think I would talk about the legal institution first. That what really needs to change is to, law enforcement has to understand the trauma related to survivor of gender-based violence. And it's kind of, when we talk about this, sometimes there will be some training, sometimes there will be just, okay, I'll do training and then that's done. But that is not enough, because we live in the society where the power imbalance is so ingrained in everybody. So even that police officer or that prosecutor or even the judge themselves has been trained about gender-based violence sensitivity for so many times, but their personal belief, that discriminatory attitude against the survivors still there. So so not just like the training, I think that there should be the funding, the government, the national funding devote to kind of have a separate, channel for survivor to access to justice, since they can report in the safe area with the confidentiality with the trained officer. They used to have one-stop crisis center, or SCC. So there still is OSCC right now in the hospital that registered with the Ministry of Health. So OSCC is supposed to be one-stop service where, for example, sexual violence survivor have injury and go directly to the hospital and have a referral system with the multidisciplinary team, with the police officer. I used to work in the province where the police station have a separate room for the OSCC case. But I think that kind of model has been disappeared since the change of the government, since our country, just dysfunction and everything. So I think we have to bring back the kind of the stronger system for the like protection mechanism in response to gender-based violence. And it's actually there are a lot of civil society who work on this issue and can willing to help strengthen capacity or like work together with the duty barriers, because we receive a lot of cases and we cannot just work alone. So eventually this kind of things need to change, and also even among not just the law enforcement, even among the social worker, and there are Ministry of Social Development and Human Department who are responsible to respond to gender-based violence case in each province. But turns out it's like sometimes they put the staff who are not trained and who are the turnover rate a lot, and sometimes they didn't put enough resource or funding there. So most of the time, even the authority who are authorized to take care of this kind of case, they're just trying to push the case away. And in the area where the migrant survivor or like undocumented survivor, of course, those people can be like discriminated against. Do you know that we have the funding, the funding for child case, we have the funding for human trafficking case, but Thailand never have a funding for violence against women. You know that we have a shelter for human trafficking, we have shelter for kids, but we never have a women refuge or like shelter for women. And I used to ask some of my colleagues who work on women's rights for so many years, and she said, do you know why they don't have a shelter for women? Because they don't actually want women to leave their husband. So I know today we talk about violence, sexual violence or rape case, but my specialization is also focused on like domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And instead of the practice of survivor-centered approach, to prioritize the safety and welfare of the survivor, they focus on the family institutions. In 2019, they want to demolish the Domestic Violence Victim Protection Act and change it into Family Welfare Act, which is the I was going to say something very bad, but okay. Anyway, so eventually that act has been paused, and they still remain the Domestic Violence Victim Protection Act, but they're still trying to attempt to push that Family Welfare Institution Act back, which is gonna it's gonna be a backwards of domestic violence protection, because then you focus on putting the survivor back to the abuser, and having the children growing up in the abusive and traumatic family. So there's a lot of things to change in terms of understanding among the authority as well, and also with the education system and awareness. So right now, as we can see, because of the social media and the movement, we can see the new generation has more interest and awareness in gender-based violence, but still it's a long way to go.
Kunana, last year there was a Thai soap opera, it showed a rape scene, and there was a large backlash to that on social media. How damaging are rape storylines on soap operas in terms of normalising rape culture, and what's the role of social media in discussing this issue? Are people discussing it in positive ways that could affect change?
Can I have the example again on like what was
There was a Thai soap opera last year that showed a rape scene.
Okay.
And there was a backlash on social media about the normalisation of rape and why the production company was wrong to put that in the soap opera.
So talking about like rape culture being portrayed in the like Thai media, I think this topic become the thesis of someone since 20 years ago, and it takes 20 years something to repeat this same topic until now. And I think recently this topic become like the study by Thai Media Fund as well to count. They actually count how many sexist scenes appear on the Thai dramas. And I think it's very interesting research, which I cannot remember exactly the number. But I think it's quite funny that we take at least 20 years to move something. That actually really makes sense since you hear it for the first time, right? And is it the positive change? Yes, I saw the positive change. Comparing back to my the start of Thai consent too, like 7 years ago, like people still don't call rape as rape, and imagine 20 years ago, someone saying that rape scene in TV, romanticizing it is weird, and people think oh, this is a brave opinion, and for me, yeah, we have positive change, and the society tends to have more. I would not say the media literacy, but they're all the รสนิยม the taste of the media also change, because it's not only because the people change, but also right now Thai audience have much more option than back then, right? We do have Netflix now, we do have the VIU, you can browse so many of the quality media from all over the world, and why you stick with the Thai media then? So it's not only that we realize something, but it's competitive, and the audience, the consumer have the choice, and that never happened for Thai media landscape many years ago. So I would say many changes that happened recently, even for the consent education, sex education, human rights education, it comes with the internet access and the freedom of people to explore more content that are produced by another individual, not the media institute. And I think the discussion of people will bring up to more advanced dialogue, as long as we still have the culture of discussion, not the culture of I don't know leave the comment and don't read it again, or the culture of I don't know algorithm where it must be less brainful, brainless action, and people come and lie a lot, and not the short culture of discussion, not the easy to digest thing, but the complexity of the discussion must be advanced. Right now, I still have one concern when people say Thailand developed. Thailand seems like we are woke, seems like we learn something. I also think is that how do we know that people really learn or think about the new thing, or is it they are following the trend that the world forcing us to go as well? I still concerned about the complexity of thinking that are being demolished in this media landscape nowadays. I feel like the media, even the news, the TV news, they don't produce news anymore, right? They are TV version of Facebook, and I am very worried about that. Yeah, people have another choice. I think that's the only reason I could give to it. It doesn't mean people really change the idea. When someone who are not the perfect victim get raped, if the sex worker get raped, if someone who have tattoo get raped, someone who dress naughty and less sexy get raped, will they be on the side of the victim? That's still the question that comes to my mind, and I still feel if that how to say, I still feel in the media. It's not only a rape scene that we have to discuss, but also another, another scene that portrays the relationship of human as well. That in Thai media, I think we also romanticize the control behavior. We also romanticize something that's subtle and actually influence many people to become the abuser in the relationship. It's so common to see, not the rape scene, but the scene where they convince their partner so hard. The scene that they try to I do this because I love you, and because I love you, you must ยอม me, you must แบบยอม เนาะ คือแบบ follow what I want because I'm good to you. It's the I sacrifice this, so you must sacrifice back. I think it's the normalization of overpower in the relationship dynamic, and that's the very subtle, and people don't really touch it. I would say Thailand make a progressive change on the things that you can see easily, something that physical, something that easy to inspect, something that you can count. For example, you can count like how many, I don't know, how many scenes being shown, how many women in the board, how many this and that, how many that and this. But when it comes to the subtle work, like what I did, no, the Thai consent, that we do the media, we do discussion, we do talk, we rarely able to claim our success because like how to count that our work create the impact of someone's life. It's not like I can send women to school, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 women. I cannot say that like within this work there will be like 3 media being popular and people interested in that, you know. I think there are the work that need like more, I know, more support, and it is not easy to count, not easy to claim, but important and subtle. I think that Thai people or Thai society need to highlight on that as well, not only the another show of the criticism show, I think. Yeah.
And just a reminder to everybody that if you're watching at home and you want a question asked of this panel, you can leave it in the question in the comments section on Facebook, and very shortly we'll open up some questions to the floor. But just one more before we do that to you, Kuntita. Do you think that there is enough funding sent towards this issue? And if yes, what do you think it's being used for? And if no, what do you think it needs to be used for?
I think apart from the facts and also what this panel has been discussed as well, we don't think there is enough funding in terms of how it's directed to this particular issue. We still see a lot of victims struggling in order to be able to be compensated, in order to be to have a place that they would like to to rest or to find a place that they can basically heal. So we don't see enough of that. But to jump to answer that question more, I think we definitely need more budget in order to respond to what's happening here. And this is a very classic example of what's happening in Thailand and many other societies as well, in which when there's a serious case happening already, and therefore it raises an awareness, and the policymakers are trying to solve the problem by providing a solution just because a very serious case has happened. It should not be that way, especially when we all agree on the fact that this is something very important, especially to victims. This is something very important in terms of how society is progressing. It should not be something that, just because something very bad happened and therefore we take divert attention into the issue. And when something serious doesn't happen anymore, or because the case is closed, or the case is being off the media, it's not a social trend anymore, and therefore there is no this kind of effort in terms of the society or public policy makers getting attention to it. It should be something that we need to work on continuously.
Thank you. We've got our first question from the floor here, Lisa Martin from AFP.
Hello, thank you so much for coming tonight. We received a verdict in the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp defamation case overnight. Thailand obviously has very strict defamation laws, and I'm just curious what the panel thinks about to what extent those very strict defamation laws are a barrier to victims and survivors coming forward and telling their stories.
Kunbas, would you like to take that one first?
Yes. So definitely defamation law in Thailand is there's a lot of gaps. While there's not enough legal and protection mechanism for survivor, you can exploit defamation law to silence many victims and survivors of not only gender-based violence but also migrant rights or like other kind of human rights abuse case. And people use defamation law to slap strategic, like systematically, strategically silent and trying to make the abused people, give up their case. And I come across the case, that is a gender-based violence survivor, talk about their story in the media. But then that case, she didn't have she didn't open the legal case yet. And I think it was after a while, and so she decided to come forward and write the story. And the abuser used the defamation law against her, and instead of, they are both in the same city, or like they are not like so far away, he decided to go to somewhere very far. I trying to avoid defamation myself, that's why it was like trying to not be so specific about the case, but like he choose, let's say if the case happened in the south, he'd go to the north to start open the case. So it's make it more difficult to survivor to travel to court and having to spend money or the traveling, having to, waste their energy and resource. And this, and it's still happening everywhere in the world, and it's in Thailand as well, that especially when the case happened for a while, when there are rape survivors, just now I was talking about how challenging for them to come out and report. And most of the time, they don't have the physical evidence already. It's almost impossible to ask sexual violence survivor for a physical violence. So most cases didn't access to justice properly. And then once they tell their story, because they want a social justice, there are defamation case there that has been exploited and has been used to silence a survivor.
Kunana, your thoughts on this question?
In my opinion, I still go back to what I said earlier, that like what we see in the media toward the justice case, is that for the justice sake or is that for the entertainment, right? And I still wonder, like when it comes to the court show, I feel that it reminds me of what happened in Thailand too, when someone someone accused someone of something, and then it's not closed yet, but they have to come to the TV show and declare what is on their head, and the moderator will be the one who lead. What do you think about this? But we have that evidence, and it become the journalists who become the court themselves, and all the conflict become the show for the public. And I think that's the upcoming trend in the media field, I guess, to have the justice show for the person. And what the audience get from this kind of the show is, it's like I can choose who I can cheer, and if the person I cheer win, I will be happy. And sometimes they will continue to cheer the person they choose because they don't want to เสียหมา they don't want to lose face, or they don't want to you choose the bad side, So it just, I think like how we watch reality show and you have your favorite person, and it also happen not only with the celebrity, but any I think even for politician, if the same case happen but with another party, I think the public will not use the same logic they use for someone they like, And I'm not sure if I answer the question right, but what I think about that and how it relates to the defamation law is, I think when the person facing this kind of conflict are someone normal, someone who are not in the public fame, the defamation law can be the tool against us, because it will be if you file it to police, it will be easier to get the verdict on the defamation law quicker than being proved in the abuse case. The abuse case might take, I think, years to prove that is it true, is it false, it is how many percent true it is, but you are already wrong in the defamation law. And compare how difficult it is, I imagine the victim of abuse already face difficulty going to the police, because some case they don't have physical evidence, they don't have record, it happened in their bedroom, it happened in a place where there are no CCTV, and there are no witness as well. It's already hard to tell the police that my only evidence is my memory. that's already hard because of what Kun Bet already say is the brain has the mechanism to erase it as well. Even your memory, you are struggle to deal with that. And without the physical evidence, I think it's very hard for victim to go to the court and answer the question to asking them to sequence things in order and organize it in a way that don't make anything contradict to each other, or else you will look like a liar. And that's really scary to see how the court system they are designed for the one who are good in arranging the story and manage the story. They are designed for the powerful to win when we talk about the domestic violence case. And I also think it must be another word beyond that question too. On I also know that since I mentioned the risk management from political party that want my consult as well, right? That they treat it as risk management. I also wonder they also consult me that actually this one is true, this one is not true. Can we accept that? Okay, my representative already did that. It's true. He will be he will ask for forgiving on that. But in this point, the person make the story up. Can we fire her back? They also ask me that question too. And when I consult, it must be it will be it's quite, how to say, it's tricky and it's partly to each of it, right? So, but what I consult and what I concern is how can we keep the essence of the justice where everyone can have a chance to prove themselves, but also not make it the barrier the barrier that prevent the one that being abused, the one who have less power to access to the justice. Those factor must be concerned, not because you will be you are so into Johnny Depp issue and you be yeah, all abuse all accuser are liar. It has a potential to go like that, I think, in the internet nowadays. And I think we must balance it and aware about our bias when it comes to the court, the story. And also I think about I just have discussion with my high school friend who are they are in the medical field, and I realized that they are one of my med friends. They consult me that most of the case that come to the hospital that are sent by the police, they are cases that want to claim rape in order to make the go to the court and ask for ค่าเสียหาย because they are minor against minor. And that's how the doctor remember the rape case, because the person who are able to access the court are the one who know that they're gonna win, are the one who know that they're gonna have a chance to prove that, and the other will lose for it. So people calculate it, and the current law, current system support that, but the system ignore the person who really need help. So not sure if it's away from the topic, but that's what I'm going to share.
Kuntita, that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard decision today, and relating that to defamation laws in Thailand, what's your take?
I'm not a legal expert myself, but I'm probably going to take an approach to this question in two levels. In terms of the principle itself, I think the principle of defamation law, whether in Thailand or anywhere, it should be very well balanced between the accuser versus the accused. I think having the law in place is also there to also protect, the one who's also going to be accused, whether it's a person is not guilty until, it's the person innocent until proven guilty. But in terms of the implementation level, I think, if you look at many cases, such as Israel or any other countries, where you have a lot of sensitive cases, sensitive law, legal cases against women, against the victims, or in many cases minority groups who are in a disadvantaged position, they actually put harsher punishment towards the one who have done wrong. So that's kind of set the standard very high. If this kind of issue gets raised up, and then therefore, they get harsher punishment. But at the same time, they also put double punishment for the accuser if it is proven to be untrue. So in that case, when society recognizes the severity of, this incident, whatever is happening, and therefore they put also harsher punishments to recognize that this is a serious issue. And I think that complements in terms of, the very principle of defamation cases as well. But I think what links into what's happening in Thailand, for example, like in Prinn's case or any other cases we have seen, whether gender or sexual violence related or not, it turns out to be that it is used or utilized as a tool for those to win the cases just because they have better lawyers. I think that should be a case, should not be a case at all. And therefore, but going back to the very principle, it should be there because you should also protect the accused.
Mm-hmm. We've got another question in the clubhouse here.
Since there's a lot of prostitution in Thailand, is there any form of Since there's a lot of prostitution in Thailand, is there any form of jurisdiction for women that are sex workers and that are rape victims?
Kunbest?
No. So let's say the access to justice, getting legal protection, and the law related to for rape survivors already challenging for them enough. But when it's come to sex workers, that they can be criminalized, by the other laws, and for them to access to justice is more challenging for them. I mean, there are laws there. I mean, the law, the criminal code of Thailand, the in the section that relate to protection of, the sex offense. The sex offense. It's not that they didn't say in the law that okay, if it's a sex worker, we're not gonna protect. But I think the problem is in the practice because of there's so many stigmatized, and there are so the law, the Prostitution Act that can be used to silence them and criminalize them as well. And it's all going back to the systemic discrimination, and it's also, just now Kuntida was talking about the deeply ingrained patriarchal culture in Thailand. And when we talk about patriarchy, it's not that we forget men or anything, it's that actually the patriarchy hurt men survivors too, because the gender norm that is kind of create how men and boys has to be powerful, has to be strong, cannot cry, cannot be emotional, or anything like that. So of course, when they come across the male survivor, they tend to, it's challenging for them to step up and speak up and get justice. While the patriarchal gender norm for women has to be lady, women has to speak a certain way, shouldn't be on this panel, shouldn't be speaking too much, shouldn't be too loud, and of course you shouldn't dress the certain way, and of course if you're a sex worker, you will already been punished by the society. So it's more kind of create another barriers and obstacle for them to really access to justice and get the understanding for the law enforcement, because even among the law enforcement or even among the service provider themselves, they're so stuck in this kind of good woman, bad woman image. And when they saw a sex worker and come to report sexual violence case, they're already gonna have so many questions and the victim blaming attitude towards the survivor. So it's very difficult.
We've got another question here in the audience as well.
Yes, I'd like to ask the lawyer, Kunbest. I understand, from my understanding, rape is considered criminal offense in Thailand. How about other form of assault like sexual harassment at workplace? Is that considered criminal offense as well?
You mean is there a law about sexual harassment in workplace?
Apart from rape, which is criminal offense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The Labor Rights Protection Act have one section that talk about, the employer cannot sexually harass the employee. And the sexual harassment section in the criminal code, there's one slightly mentioned in the the minor action. So there are things written in the Labor Protection Act that can be related to sexual harassment in workplace. But I would still go back to most of the challenge in accessing justice is related to in practice level. I come across so many law enforcement who doesn't understand sexual harassment at all and trying to kind of minimize the action and say, oh, this is not sexual harassment. I have a case of a friend who has been stalked for 2 years and still have been stalked until today, but she hasn't been touched. The perpetrator has never have a chance to come close to her, but she would sit in front of her office and stalk her for 2 years, and the police officers say, oh, because he's fond of you, this is not sexual harassment. And so there are things written in the law, but then law in books doesn't make justice in real life. Thank you.
A question from online, and Kunana, I'll ask you this one. Are there any rape crisis services out in rural and remote Thailand that people can turn to?
I can't hear the question again.
Are there any rape crisis services that people in rural and remote parts of Thailand can turn to?
Oh, in remote area, I think Beth can answer
Okay.
this more.
So in the remote area, they still have the kind of the provincial hospital, and by policy, every provincial hospital must have the one-stop crisis center. Some place might not be active, but they're supposed to. So if, let's say, it's happened in a very border and rural area, they still are able to, I think when incident happened, the first place that survivors should go to, not the police station, the first place is the hospital, because you prioritize the physical safety, the well-being, psychosocial support. So you can go to the provincial hospital in your area and ask for OSCC service. And in some area, you can be able to identify some of the non-profit organization as well. And actually, there's a numbers of NGO in the rural area in Thailand, and also in every province they will have the social department and human security that responsible to respond to gender-based violence case. And for the child survivor, every province have a child protection officer. So that's kind of government national mechanism. Even in some place seem inactive, but there are resources there. And in terms of legal system, if you couldn't find a lawyer, if you feel like the police officer in your area are inactive, you can go to the public prosecutor office, because in every area, in some faraway area might be far to the office, but in every province and every district should have access to public prosecutor office that provide legal aid to women and children and provide legal aid related to human rights as well. And it's their responsibility to assist you, whether to get protective order, whether to represent children survivor, or even give legal consultation and assist gender-based violence survivor to justice system.
I want to add on with Kun Base นิดนึงค่ะ that yes we and bring back to the women's shelter topic that we supposed to have more in Thailand because even we have this structure which I think we can know that some place work and some place not. Also one factor, and it's about designing and the behavior, is the location and the transportation. In the very rural area, everything is so far away, and some province only have I think you have to travel 20-30 kilometers. And if it happen at night, and if you don't know how to drive the car, or you don't have access to the car, what will you do, right? And if the case are children, it is no way children in the rural area can have their autonomy, I think, to travel across the city unless they know how to drive very well, right? And I think that's maybe we also have to think about how to closing the gap of moving from place to place to make the life being more getting to the support easier as well for the people in the rural area.
We've heard a lot tonight about the barriers and the gaps and the lack of women's shelters. Kuntita, does the conversation tonight motivate you, and do you hope it motivates other people in politics to talk more about this issue and start doing something more about it?
Certainly. I think this motivation does not need a conversation tonight. It has always been there. Being in politics in which also the leader of the party is female, she's very passionate and motivated in terms of helping other female around the country, not only those who are involved in politics. But also very saddening to hear that there are more detailed issues that are happening despite the fact that the society or a lot of people are trying to improve the situation, to improve the condition for a lot of victims, particularly women in this case. There's still a lot of people who have to turn to different entities in which it only means that the government does not supply enough of help or assistance towards these victims. So I think that these gaps that we have addressed, for sure, the government officials, public policy makers need to take into consideration even more in terms of what they can do to fill the gap, whether it's going to be budgeting, whether it's going to be resource allocation, or how they put the priorities in terms of these issues. So for sure, the motivations has always been there, and even more motivated after discussing with all the experts tonight, and also hearing questions from the audience from the floor. So for sure.
And we do have one more question from the floor before we head off, so take it away.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the panel. I'm here from Canada, and it's so inspiring to hear the work that's being done here in Thailand. My question centers around the rape of a non-sex worker who is Thai, but if she is raped or he is raped from a foreign national from another country, how are the Thai police responding in that kind of scenario?
Actually, like, I come across the actual case, and what the first response is like most of the officer cannot speak, and so sometimes when I come across the officer who knows that the foreigner is the perpetrator, they kind of trying to push the case away, or trying to just like, oh no, I cannot do this, or something like that. So what we have to do is if we come across that case, we're trying to find a support system for survivor and interpreter to kind of assist the police in accessing the justice system, but then prioritizing the physical and mental health psychosocial support first. So the right channel is to direct survivor to the hospital to have a proper body check, to speak to a social worker, to speak to a psychologist, and whether they have any trauma-related consideration to be taken into account. And then we advocate with the officer in the area who's, sometimes we have to like explain to them, this is going to be the challenge of the survivor, and this is going to be the challenge of the case. But then we're willing to help coordinate with the police in terms of the capacity, the language barrier that might happen. So, I mean, it's not that if the foreigner is the perpetrator, you cannot do anything. You can still proceed the legal case, but when there are cases where the perpetrator just leave the country, the only thing you can do is to put on the notice with the immigration that this is happening. If you push the case to the court, then what can leave there is the arrest warrant. So right when the perpetrator step into Thailand again, he'll be arrested. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can add on a little bit, because when we talk about the crimes or the abuse that happen between two nationality, I also concerned when it happen within the online space as well, because nowadays you can have the online sexual abuse or the harm, you can be the sex worker who get steal the clip and being sold cheaper in another website, You don't know like where or how to find or follow the one who stole your copyright. You know, you cannot protect yourself on that on this scenario. And nowadays there are sex workers who work online and have clients online as well. Now there are like, no system on the online cases. We don't know whether like where should be which country should take the case. If the server is there, the producer is there, and the client is there, right? So there are big questions coming around on like how the inter-police will work together or deal with the borderless interaction between humans. And I think that will link to it come to Thailand things too, when the like online crime happen between like the province. Sometimes even like when I go and try to find that this person try to like assault me, they might ask, do you know where the person lives? If it in like are they living like outside of this city? Is that another province? When we have the like geological different Thai police, they try to be like, oh, then it's not my responsibility. You need to follow up with like where you know the person stay. So if he's in Phuket, I must like fly from Chiang Mai to Phuket and like find where is that person. And I think it will be a good question to think about it in the maybe next FCCT talk too, on like how we deal with the international conflict when it's relationship, when it's like involved with the sexual act, when it's involved with the rape, etc.
Kuntita?
Yeah, I just would like to chip in my final thoughts. So my experience from sitting in the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Parliament, I think I've come across a lot of international incidents, whether it's related to this case as an example or not, but also other cases. So from what I've seen for a few years, you know, there's always this frustration coming from the Thai nationals, coming to the politicians, members of parliament, policymakers, saying that it's very frustrating, especially when a case is involved with international affairs, and there's always a discount you have to take into consideration when you need to make certain decisions. But I would like to say that this one particular politician, and that day he said something very, very inspiring that I still remember until today. Quoted, he said, when it involves a Thai national, we will do our best to protect the best interests of the Thai nationals, regardless of other considerations. So I think in this case, you know, as a public policy maker, eventually politicians, you know, if I represent Thai nationals, I would say, especially in a case that if a Thai national is a victim, and therefore that would be their best interest that we would uphold. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much to all three of you for a truly fascinating discussion tonight. Thank you to everyone who is in the club and everybody watching online. Thank you also to our technical staff and the staff in the club for making tonight possible. Could everybody please thank our three most excellent panellists. Good night.